Hi, welcome to my podcast, Reclaim. I am your host, Thaís Sky. I have supported women navigate the complexities of being human for over 10 years. This podcast is where I disseminate some of those learnings and offer thoughts and guests to guide you into your healing. Welcome. Hello, beautiful humans. Thaís Sky here. Welcome to my podcast. I'm obviously so thrilled that you're here. And I received really good feedback about my episode last week on impulsivity. It sounds like this is an experience that many of us struggle with, and it's always so wonderful to hear that we're not alone. Yes, I share thoughts here with you all that I've seen in my own work, that I've seen in the women that I work with. But of course, it's always wonderful to hear from all of you letting me know that this resonates. It makes me feel like I'm not just talking to myself in a microphone, and that you all are out there. And it also gives me a temperature read of what's going on out there and how universal is this experience. And it sounds like for so many of you, making decisions out of this kind of trauma space or out of this deep fear of self really resonated. And so thanks for all of the wonderful messages, and I'm so glad that it landed with all of you. I also shared last week on my episode of Impulsivity that I do have spots available for one-on-one coaching. This doesn't happen terribly often. I often bring on new clients every 6 months or so, and right now spots are available, and they are going quite quickly. So if you are interested in deepening your work, if you listen to this podcast and the things that I say resonate with you, and you just kind of enjoy my approach to things and the ways in which I think about things, then working together may be a really good fit. This is particularly true if you consider yourself sensitive and soulful, smart, and yet you often struggle with realizing your potential. Yes, you often feel like you get in your own way, and that no matter how many times you read something that says, do this or do that, it doesn't seem to change. It's like there's something really stubborn within you that can't seem to change no matter how much we know, right? Like we know we want to do things differently, and yet we find ourselves doing things the way we've always done things. And it can be quite painful, that disconnect between knowing and doing. And that is my special sauce, so to speak. That is what I thrive in working with women around. Is how do we do the deeper shifts required in order to have a full knowing and rather than a dissonance between the two, a congruence where we are behaving and being in the world the way that we wish we behaved and are in the world. So if you are interested in learning more about coaching with me, you can go to thaissky.com/coaching. You can also go to the show notes to learn more there. And at the bottom of that page, you'll have an opportunity to schedule a low pressure call with me for us to get to know each other and see if we're the right fit and what working together looks like. So again, you can go to thaissky.com/coaching. Spots are limited. So if you're interested, I wouldn't spend too much time thinking about it by yourself, but actually let's think about it together. Yes, you won't really know if we're a good fit until we're on that call and we're talking and we're exploring, and then we can see what working together looks like. Okay, so I thought today that I would talk a little bit about speed, or the ways in which our sense of urgency may be impacting other aspects of our lives. We talked about on the episode on impulsivity around how oftentimes this sense of urgency can come from quite a broken place within us, right? Sense of urgency tells us where we are, how we are, is not good enough, is not enough. And if we do things quickly, if we can resolve the tension quickly, then we'll get to where we want to be. We'll get to the point where we are happy or healed, or we have the money, the security, whatever it is that we're seeking. Speed is something that is often very much relished in our culture. It feels pervasive that getting from point A to point B as quickly as possible is the name of the game, is the way in which we're taught to view success. And this is often true when we're talking about learning something new, particularly as adults. This past weekend, I got to hang out with some friends, and one of the couples there has 2 children under the age of 2. It's really cool to spend some time in observation of children and to think about what it must have been like for us to be attempting to process and take in the world from such a little mind, from such a place of still not really knowing how things work, right? And not really knowing much. And I observed throughout the weekend that the little one, the toddler, was, learning how to walk and could walk, could get to places, but it often happened that he would fall. He fell quite often, pretty tumbles that ouch, right? As adults, it would not feel good. And luckily, children are much more flexible and nimble than us adults are. But watching how often he fell, and yet his curiosity and his interest in the world didn't prevent him from getting back up and trying again. And it just took an affirmative stance from his parents, right? A smile, you're safe, it hurts, and you're okay. That's all it took for him to be like, yeah, I am okay, and I'm going to keep going. I bring this example in because I think as adults, we really struggle with learning something new, don't we? We don't have kind of that deeper trust, that deeper knowing that we're going to figure it out. For us, I think our sense of urgency, our need to know, comes from this deep sense of if I don't have speed in this, if I don't learn this right away, then it's affirming something about us. It's saying something about us. It's saying that, oh, see, you are inadequate. And children just don't have that, at least not at that age. They're really, they don't take it personal. And, one could argue it's because their brain's not quite there yet. But there's something really beautiful and simple about the fact that children just keep trying, and that actually, as long as the adults around them are delighting in them learning, they're actually delighting in learning as well. And there's a spaciousness to it, isn't there? Where they just kind of, there's just a stance of knowing that eventually they're going to figure it out. There is no urgency. And as a result, I think it's that lack of urgency and that trust in self that allows them to figure things out quite quickly. And it's quite incredible how quickly children learn and pick things up and do things that, for us as adults take a long time. When I moved to the US from Brazil, I learned I was fluent in English in about 2 months. That's incredible, right? The child's brain is so malleable, so plastic, so wonderful. Anyway, I think partly what gets in our way is this idea that speed means something about us. That if we do things quickly, it means that we are competent. It means that we are capable. It means that we can trust ourselves. It means that we're good. It means that we're successful. When I first became an entrepreneur, for example, when I first started my business, there was a lot of expectation that if you could have a 6-figure year in your first year, if you could climb your business to that level of success that quickly, then you were a success, right? That meant that you did it right, that you did it well. And there's so much that we don't see behind people who can create a business in a 6-figure business in 1 year. They may have had a lot of capital to invest. And if you have enough to invest, you're going to make that amount. Now, whether it's going to be sustainable, whether it's going to be profitable over the long term is a totally different question. But we're not asking that question at that time, right? We're just saying, oh, speed equals success. And so we kind of get into this mindset that if speed equals success, then anything slow, anything that takes time, anything that requires space and a consistent commitment to showing up to self, that means that we're not catching on quickly. That means that there's something wrong. And that's usually a sign that we're not believing the universe enough. In the world of manifestation, there's the idea of collapsed time, where if we argue that time is an illusion, time is a social, a man-made construct, or there is many ways to measure things, and time is just one way that we have found to measure things. It's not the only way. Then we can actually collapse time and have things that we thought was going to take 6 months take no time. And I think we've all had these kind of miracle moments happen, right? Where we thought it was going to take a certain amount of time. It's going to take 2 years for this to happen. And then something just shifts and happens, and we end up being able to make that happen in a month, or let's say whatever. I think we've all had moments of that. And so again, it kind of feeds this idea that if you are in alignment, or if you have the right vibes, or if you think right and have the right mindset, if blank blank, then it will happen quickly. Quickness is the answer to all of our problems. If you were meant to have kids, you will have them quickly, right? It will be easy. The first attempt with your partner, for example, or your first attempt at in vitro, your first attempt, if it's right, it will happen the first time. I was watching a Brazilian show on Netflix where the singer went to go and compete at a contest. And it was her first time ever putting herself out there as a singer, competing in a contest. And, she was embarrassed. She was mortified. She really failed because she didn't have practice with that type of equipment, et cetera, et cetera. And she told her manager, like, I'm quitting. I'm giving up. This shouldn't have happened. And the manager's like, everyone fails their first time. But she had it in her mind that if you fail, it means you're not meant to do this. And again, it's that speed. If she was meant to do this, she would have done it right the first time. And I'm noticing how often that this plays out in many different subtle ways in my life, and how it continues to actually perpetuate a narrative of, many narratives. One of them being is that we can't really trust the timing of our lives. Now, if you've been here for any length of time, you know that I love that idea. The idea of trusting the timing of our lives, trusting that our lives, that the way things will unfold in our lives is going to unfold for us. Maybe we don't understand it in the moment, but that there is this timing that things that we want will happen. And as long as we continue to put effort and put ourselves into it, like, the things will happen. And it's important for us to trust this timing, and that our timing is going to look different than other people's timings. Well, it can be hard to trust this timing if we're also believing that speed is the answer. Right? That things have to happen quickly in order for them to be proper, in order for them to be right. Now, let's talk now about my realm of expertise, the realm of inner healing, of tending to our inner realms, right? To doing the healing work. I know that the word healing is very broad. It can mean a lot of things, but I'm speaking to essentially like the healing of the soul, like the tending to the sacred broken places within us and setting things right, to tend to the ways in which we've been wounded and hurt, so that we can create a future that is different from the past. Healing for me is about entering corrective relationships, healing relationships that allow us to experience a different relational dynamic than we ever had in the past. Healing is about making sense of things with someone else and learning how to trust support and trust our own minds, so that we can drop some of the people-pleasing and perfectionism and comparitis tendencies, so we can be more authentic, so we can create more alignment in our lives of things that we so deeply want. This is what I see as healing. This is what I do in my coaching work. This is all about making sure that the inner and the outer align. Maybe for you, that's about entering a really thriving, dynamic relationship or relationships. Or maybe for you, it's about tending to the ways in which you feel insecure, broken, incompetent. Maybe for you, it's about the worthiness wound. Or maybe for you, it's about finding a security, a confidence in your work and your ability to put yourself out there. Wherever your facet of healing is wanting to take place, it's important for us to be thinking about what we're subtly communicating when we're expecting the healing work to happen quickly. Because I get this a lot. People come to me and they say, "You're an expert. You've been doing this for a long time. So I expect that we'll be able to do this quite quickly. In a few months' time, I should be able to be more blank, right? I should be able to be more blank. And if you're good, Thaís, if you're good, then you're going to get me there and you're going to get me there quickly." And listen, I don't blame that perspective, particularly in the healing spaces, whether we're talking about therapy or coaching, both kind of industries, both containers, there is a lot of noise about how things should happen quickly. If we're talking about the world of mental health, specifically the world of therapy, there are plenty of therapists whose whole approach is limited session-based work, treatment. So for example, in 10 sessions, you should see a reduced symptoms of anxiety. And that is what they sell. That is what they market. That is their entire treatment modality, is that in a certain number of sessions, you'll see a reduced symptomology. That's quite pervasive in the world of mental health. And I've talked a lot about it in my series about talk therapy. And if you want to go check out that series, you're more than welcome to, where I talk about why the mental health industry is the way it is and why it's that way and why that's problematic. And in the coaching world, there is a lot of talk about how the most expertise coach can get you places very quickly. And, of course, that's very fun to market. It's fun to market, or fun. It works. That type of marketing works. People like this idea of something fast, of there being someone out there who can laser into the problem, give you the solution, and then you can be on your merry way. And I think that because it's marketed as such by people who have authority, the layman's person is going into this thinking, oh, well, if they're marketing it, it must mean that they can deliver it. It must mean that that's what's true. And so, of course, if we're caught between needing to decide something slow and painful or something quack, oh, Freudian slip there, or something quick and efficient, then why would anyone want to choose a slow one? I mean, that's silly. Like, we don't have time to waste here. Time is a precious commodity. If we want to be healed and happy and confident and have no issues, then of course we're going to choose the fast route versus the slow route. And that's a little bit of like shame on the marketers, right? Like shame on people who are marketing it this way. Because the problem with it is that we're not really giving all of the information, which is this. You can choose the fast route, but that fast route is most likely going to be a Band-Aid. And it may offer some alleviation of something. It may give you some answers quickly, but it's not going to be able to change the deeper stuff. I think if more people knew that, if they really knew their choices, I don't think most people would choose the fast route. I think if people really understood that that the fast options were Band-Aid options and they could help short-term in alleviation, but that all the healing work that really changes things deeply within us is slow work, I think most people would choose slow. I really do. I have a lot of faith in humanity, but I think that our culture is very pervasive in telling us that the fast is the answer. I think then we get hooked into it as practitioners and thinking that we have to offer something that's quick and fast. And then I think we fall into this idea that if they are going to offer something quick and fast, then it means that they have the power to do it quick and fast, and then we don't actually have to take responsibility. That's something that isn't really talked about, that I think we have to grapple with. Those of us, I mean, I'm speaking really to myself here. I love the fast and quick. Again, impulsivity is my game, right? Like that's what I'm really been struggling with, for the past few years. And what I've been really tending to is that I believe in so many ways that if it's right, it'll happen fast. And I've really had to untangle from this. And part of this untangling is to notice where you may hold this hope that if you heal quickly, then you won't actually have to take responsibility for the changes that must take place. If they heal you, you don't have to do shit, right? And this is true for ayahuasca ceremonies. This is true in some ways for psychotropic, not always. I want to be careful here. I'm not saying anything, there's any problems with taking psychotropic medication, but I'm just saying, like, where are you hoping that by taking some benzos, some anti-anxiety meds, where do you hope that by signing up for this retreat, where do you hope that by pouring money into this one thing, you won't have to actually take responsibility for the changes that only you can do? And that sucks. It's really hard to grapple with this. Not, I think, because we like to avoid responsibility because we're lazy or bad. No. I think we don't take responsibility because we're scared. Because if we slow things down, now we have to feel. If we slow things down, now we're going to have to grapple with the complexities of our pain, with the complexities of our lives, with the fact that there actually is no right or wrong, that there really is very little that is black and white. We're going to have to question things that we've held on tightly for a long time. We're going to have to do things differently. We're going to have to really own our part in things and be with this ouch moment of realizing how much our struggle is ours and no one is going to take it away. This is really hard to sit with. We have been hurt. We have experienced trauma. Bad things happen to us. It is so painful. Our systems are so unjust. Our world is so unfair. We have been victimized. We have been manipulated. We have been gaslit. We have been harmed and hurt. And we must be the ones to repair. This is so hard. This is so hard. Because it's unfair in some ways. No, we've been harmed. It's the other person. But while we wait for the other person, we suffer. And it doesn't have to be that way. We can actually own and do something and tend to our internal experience. We don't actually have to wait for anything outside of us to change to do that. And it's not to say that it's either outside or inside, right? It's not, they're so interconnected that there's no point in separating. It's just that as we grapple with the internal, the external does shift, and or we find ways in which we can take ownership and control and power and exert influence over the outside. Something really, really profound happens when we slow things down and when we come to terms with the fact that slowing things down means that we have more power. We have more space to choose how we want to respond, to choose how we want to engage in the world, to choose what we want to focus our attention on. But that means having to be with all of our stuff. And I think that's in many ways why we instead choose that sense of urgency, why instead we choose to just keep going. Speed. One of my least favorite kind of TV show, like plot line, I think it's just so lazy, is when like a conflict happens that could be so easily rectified by just a conversation, but instead we just keep taking action from assumptions, and it just leads the characters into these really painful dynamics that are so unnecessary. For whatever reason, the first example that comes to mind is Ross and Rachel on Friends, right? Like when they went on a break or didn't go on a break, and that whole debacle, like that whole thing could have been solved by one conversation, and yet instead it took like the rest of the show for them to reconcile with that. And it's frustrating because it feels so lazy, and it just kind of promotes this idea that like, I don't know, that good communication doesn't make for good TV, which I guess is true. I guess it's true. TV thrives off of drama. And I think many of us also do that. We also thrive off of drama, yes, of taking action, making decisions based on our limited perspective and our fleeting emotions, and declaring things and then taking action on things and then not waiting for things to slow down and then just going for it. I often tell my clients that when we're feeling really emotional, like if we're feeling really upset or really angry, that is not the time to be making decisions. That's just not the time, because we're just not clear-headed. Whatever decision we make will be coming from a temporary internal state that they'll probably regret, that they'll probably wish they would have just given themselves a little bit more space and time. And yet, it's so hard to tolerate these difficult internal states that we want to do everything we can to change it. And action taking empowers us. And so it's fleeting, but it's delicious. Like, I'm angry with you. You hurt me. I'm feeling all these bad feelings, so I'm just going to break up with you. And by now pushing you away, by ending this relationship, I no longer have to be with these yucky feelings. Now I can go back to what I know, which is that no one is there for me, that I'm inevitably going to have to be alone for the rest of life, whatever, etc. Beliefs that kind of underline our painful patterns that we talked about in last episode, right? How difficult it is to break patterns. And we break patterns by slowing things down. And for the billionth time, slowing things down can be really, really hard. In order to slow things down, we have to be able to tolerate our internal states. So, a long time ago, back when I was a yoga teacher, I taught a lot about mindfulness. Yes, mindfulness on and off the mat, and the power of slowing things down. And when you're on your yoga mat, it makes sense what it means to slow things down, to really go through each pose with breath and with transition, and like noticing how your arms move. And mindfulness is relatively easier when it's focused on one activity. Brushing your teeth, bringing mindfulness to teeth brushing, bringing mindfulness to washing the dishes. These things are easy. Easier, relatively. It's actually quite hard to do even those things, but we can kind of wrap our minds around it. And what I've always struggled with is wrapping my mind around, like, what does mindfulness in my life look like outside of like mindfulness in activities? Besides like a walking meditation, right? Like, what is mindfulness in my life? And this is what I'm starting to come to terms with, that slowing things down is profound and beautiful, but it's only one side of the equation. The other side is our capacity to tolerate our internal states. Because if we can't tolerate what's inside of us, it will be next to impossible to slow down. So it's like the chicken or the egg. What comes first, the tolerating or the slowing down? And I say it's a both and. It's playing with both. But as we practice being with our emotions and understanding our emotions and thinking about our internal states, we inherently in that slow our lives down. Because slowing our lives down really means bringing more thought to decisions. Decisions are the transitional points. If you think about in yoga, right, going from pose A to pose B, let's say going from up dog to down dog. Yes, can you imagine that? Up dog, the transition is basically lifting your hips up and bringing it back. Yes? Flipping your feet over. Up dog, down dog. Okay, if that's the transition that you bring breath and thoughtfulness into, then life's transition is in the decision of going from up dog to down dog. and thinking about that decision and then being in that decision mindfully. Now, let's think about in terms of something else, going on a date with this person. That decision and how you approach that decision is the transition where mindfulness can be. Okay, so, that's the good news. The good news is, okay, like maybe we can conceptualize mindfulness in a way about it being about decision making. And that means that part of how we think about decision making is in being able to tolerate what comes up inside of us as we make that decision. Now, I have a whole podcast on decision making, and I wonder if in some ways I may be repeating myself here. Isn't that delightful? Don't we need things to be repeated often? So I'm going to link that episode in the show notes as well. And if it does connect some things together, wonderful. That's thrilling. But I think the message I really want to leave for all of you is that there is no magical solution to healing. Healing requires a slow working through of our deep internal states and making sense of things and letting things take time. That is how transformational, deep changing, deep lasting changes happen. And there's just no way around it. And I tell this to people who are interested in working with me. I do ask for a minimum of 5 months, but often 5 months is just the beginning. It just takes time. And I'm not afraid of that. I'm not afraid of things taking time because I have seen in my own life and seen in the lives of my clients after doing this work for 10 years that it's actually time is our friend. Time isn't inherently isn't the answer. It's not time in and of itself, but what we do with that time and giving ourselves the grace and the capacity to trust that time is on our side. That is how we start to see that it does require some really spaciousness in order for things to change. Now, time is an illusion in many ways. Of course, I'm not saying that miracles don't happen. I'm saying that miracles isn't the answer for the deep changes we want to make. Miracles are like little gifts, but we can't rely on little gifts. We have to continue to show up for ourselves. We have to be in this work. And so if all of this is resonating and you're like, yes, I'm already doing this. This is what I'm doing, then good. Let this be this affirmation that you need, that you are on the right path, that the good things in life, the way that we kind of break free from internalized capitalism, the way in which we see all of these like mentors of ours who've been doing this for a long time, and we can see that there's this like spaciousness within them. It's because they know how to slow it down within themselves. And that's exciting. There is a path here. There is a method to the madness. There's a way we can do this, and it lies in our abilities to slow things down around our decisions. Yes? Okay. I look forward to hearing how this episode resonates with all of you. Of course, you can find me on Instagram at I am Thaís Sky. If you're interested in one-on-one coaching, go to thaissky.com/coaching. You can also go theoretically to iamthaissky.com/coaching, whatever is easiest for you. I can't wait to hear from all of you about how this episode lands, and I will talk to you all next week.